Maybe don't know.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build. 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 This time power. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I am your host, Chris Hampton. Welcome to episode 96 of the Power Company Podcast, brought to you by PowerCompanyClimbing.com. First off, I apologize. I know I've been slacking over here on the podcast anyway. I've definitely not been slacking. I just haven't put out any podcasts. That's because I've been essentially breathing sawdust and foam adhesive fumes for the last few weeks, trying to get the machine shop wrapped up and together, and it's come along really, really nicely. I'll have it done for the most part, essentially done when the Climbers Festival rolls around. And if you're stoked to come in for a movement assessment, something like that, hit me up. You can find me at PowerCompanyClimbing.com. Pretty simple. Otherwise, because I've got all that going on, and I get married in like 5 days or 6 days, or I don't know, I lost count. I get married really soon, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump into this thing. And that's why you came here anyway, right? You didn't come here to listen to me ramble about all the things we've got going on. You came for Jorg Verhoeven, and I don't blame you. I mean, he's one of the nicest guys in climbing, period. And Jorg and I sat down at Vail, where I was emceeing the World Cup and watching Alex Puccio absolutely dominate, which was incredibly exciting to get to witness. I damn near lost my voice going crazy when she crushed women's four. But anyway, Jorg and I sat down to talk about Project 9B, which is a website that he started in response to his own big goal of someday climbing 9B, 515B. And if you're unfamiliar with Jorg, which I can't imagine how you would be, but if you are, Jorg is a Dutch climber who has been around and climbed a lot of different styles and a lot of different things. One of the most accomplished all-around climbers that there is. Just as an example, in 2002 and 2004, he was youth world champion. He's not a spring chicken anymore. Not that he's old by any means. I'm still 10 years older than he is, but I think he just turned 33. So he was youth world champion back then. He has since gone on to win the combined World Cup in 2007, the overall winner of the lead World Cup in 2008. He's been on 25 plus World Cup podiums. He's climbed 14 plus V15. He's freed the Nose and the Dihedral Wall and on ElCap. Basically, he's an all-around machine. The guy is a really, really great climber and very, very unassuming. Incredibly nice, like I mentioned before. Anyway, I'm going to jump into this conversation with Jorg Verhoeven, and I will see you guys on the other side, just to give you a couple of my own thoughts.
Maybe don't know.
Those days of work on very few feet of climbing, I think that changed something for me. I kind of fell in love with the search for detail and like the perfection of a certain sequence.
Power. This time to build power. This time to build.
I really want to dig into interesting look into not only the training behind it, but the idea behind the training and
I was surprised as well to see how it developed. How it got from like just an idea into something that is it grew into nice dimensions.
Yeah.
Like we started asking a couple of questions, and then all of a sudden it got a lot bigger. Like for me,
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting.
You didn't expect that people would be that into it?
No, not at all. But it like primarily it was something for me, and then eventually I decided to, or John Glassberg from 1111, he was psyched right away. So he was, he wanted to make a film about it, and when I started training, I somehow saw there was some interest from other people, and I just wanted to, to just write down what I trained, like what I did, more to myself than to other people.
Right.
Then I realized, well, if I put this on the internet somewhere, it's going to be some kind of a blog or website anyway. So I started developing a little site around it, and I think it got quite nice, and people were happy about it.
Yeah, I think it's good because we don't often get a look into the entire process. That
was the entire idea. Like I didn't know myself, and there's not a lot of information about it since there's not so many people, and those people are, they're active on social media and stuff, but it's not like they're sharing the entire process. You kind of only see you
get the little glimpses of success.
Yeah, you see some glimpses of struggle, which is obviously part of the game, and then you see success, and everybody's happy, but there's more to it.
Yeah.
There's a lot more. Yeah,
there's so much more that goes into it. From what I can tell, your Project 9B, as it was made public, happened about, I don't know, it was maybe started about 6 or 9 months before the website was actually up. Is that right?
I have no idea, actually. It's kind of hard because for me, it was a bit of a weird trajectory as well. I was like, the idea itself started like years back.
Sure.
When I was
as a big goal.
Yeah, I was the original idea was I've been doing comms, like I started doing lead comms 15 years ago or something.
Yeah. Then
eventually switched a bit to bouldering comms, and now I'm kind of switching back to lead comms. But the idea was that I'm always training for specifically for competitions, and I'm taking these little rock trips or sometimes these longer rock trips for almost a bit of a vacation, something to decide, and it's nice because you're training for competitions, but so that keeps you fit for the trips to go outside.
Sure.
But it's not like if I wanted to climb something really hard, I knew that I had to train for it specifically. Like the times when I went outside and tried something hard in the past was basically always like post competition season, and you're tired from traveling around the world all the time. So you're not the most fit anymore. The main training phase is like at least 6 months back. And I developed this idea. It's a very basic idea. Like what would happen if I just trained specifically for a certain rock route or something, and then see the competitions as plan B or goal B, I should rather say.
Right. So the focus was on preparing
it's like
for the
shifting
route.
the focus. Yeah. And I knew that I would descend or stop doing competitions like slowly. Maybe 2 years ago, it kind of my attention dropped a little bit. I think this is one of my last years. So eventually, I kind of reactivated the idea. I was like, okay, if there is a point, if there is a time, then this is the time. I need to do it right now.
Yeah.
And I reactivated that. I think last summer. So summer. What is that? Summer 2018. No.
2017.
Summer 2017, yeah. And right after the season, I started right away to develop a plan. A lot together with my wife Kata, since she's a lot better with she's a sports scientist, so she knows about training,
right?
And I know from experience
it's a good thing to have
what
around.
I do. That's amazing. I actually never realized that until now how much information there is. How handy that can be.
Yeah.
So I started developing a plan together with Kata, and I think training started November. And that's where I got like the oldie training information on paper, and then I decided to just throw it on the web and have other people see it as well. So maybe they, the idea was they can at least see what I'm doing and maybe benefit for their own projects.
Yeah. So leading into this thing, you had been a successful comp climber, 25 plus podiums. You've won a lead World Cup season.
Mm-hmm. It's a long time, yeah.
What amount
years
of
comps,
what amount of the training that you learned in those comp training seasons carried over to this, do you think? Was it radically different? Was it departure completely?
No. It's actually far from that. So as far as I see it, training, or for me, training is gym based. Mm-hmm. Like I got a great climbing facility within, 5 minutes by bike from my house. So if you look at competition climbing, of course, all the training is done in a gym.
Sure.
And I think there's any people that practice competition climbing and train outside. And when you look at rock routes, especially like high-end sport climbs, they're actually quite similar to like the abilities you need to have. They're quite similar to what especially like lead climbers train for.
Right.
So the fun thing for this project was that I could really shift my focus to I could really specialize to what I needed to. So in the past, I'd been training for, let's say if I was training for lead competitions, you kind of know what you're up to. The walls are always in between, I wouldn't know in feet, it's like 15 to 17 meters all the time. So it's quite steep, but the route setting always changes. The style of route always changes. So you gotta prepare in a very broad way.
Right.
So you can't just do only crimps. I mean, you would mess up on volumes or big slopers. Sometimes there's really bouldering moves. Sometimes it's just 50 move endurance. So like I said, like a broad way of training is kind of necessary for comp climbing. Mm-hmm. But then for Project 9B, the first part was actually looking for routes. And when I had found the route, I knew exactly what I needed to, like the abilities I needed to have. So it was actually quite nice to be able to train so specifically. To give an example, the route I eventually picked is Fight or Flight in Oliana. And some specifics of this route is very bad feet, not too decent holds, but most of them are like kind of inverted, like either underclings or side pulls. There's not too many like straight down pulls.
Right.
The feet are always they're always not where you want them.
Right.
So these are all kind of aspects where you can specifically train for. So I kind of did a very similar training to what I did during my lead climbing days or comp training, but I could really specialize it down to what's necessary for this specific route. That's why eventually it didn't make sense anymore to try other routes, because I was really training for basically 25 hard moves to a rest to 15 more hard moves.
Yep.
And I set a route in the gym. I did like 25 move circuits. So it's all very specific down to this route, which was totally new for me. And it was actually very motivating.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Was the motivation different for this versus training for a World Cup season? Because you do have this one very specific goal. And in some ways, that gets a little dangerous too, because a lot of expectation is put on it. So
yeah, I think motivation and expectation is always that's kind of like two separate topics. But if it comes to motivation, I never really had problems with that, especially since I think the most important thing was I like the motivation kind of like tripled because it was something new.
Right.
I think the main reason why I moved from lead climbing after like 10 years of lead climbing, why I moved to bouldering competitions.
Yep.
Was that it kind of got a little monotone. Mm-hmm. Like I was always doing the same training, doing the same comps. The comps started to feel after like 60, 70 comps, you recognize the similarities, and the challenge was a bit gone. Even though I wasn't winning at all, I was even like getting worse and stuff. But that's not the point. Everything started to feel the same, and this that was quite a nice change to move on to bouldering. Like the training's completely different, the comps are completely different. So that gave me a lot of motivation to continue and renew my training, like adapt to certain new styles. And it was the same for Project 9B. I all of a sudden had, like I said before, a very specialized goal, but also a completely new goal. And it opens all these possibilities. And it was just super motivating to just to train for something different than in the past. Mm-hmm. It's hard to explain why, but I was actually surprised myself how much motivation there all of a sudden was.
Yeah, I started out largely as a trad climber and an on-site climber, and loved on-siting and enjoyed training to be an on-site climber. But I really fell in love with red pointing and the process of preparing for one really hard route that I didn't expect to. I thought for sure I was just going to learn some about red pointing and then go back to on-siting. But now I'm almost purely red point climber.
It was something new to me as well, and I really got to appreciate it.
Yeah, comp format, you're on-siting all the time, right?
Mm-hmm. Which is a very nice, type of climbing as well. But
sure,
I think I don't know. I asked myself once whether the ability to really project, like to red point a route and prepare for it for like months, whether that actually comes with age. I spoke to Edu Marin, and he said the same. Actually, I think he's exactly my age. I think we're both born in '85, and he said the same thing, that a couple of years ago, he suddenly had this change from like always on-site climbing. Edu's a very, very good climber, especially a rock climber as well.
Yeah.
And he's on-sited like up to 14B or something, or maybe even 14C. And all of a sudden, he said with turning 30 or something, he just got way more interested in pure red pointing, like preparing as well as possible. Like I think it's the eye for detail.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. It happened to me around the same age.
Yeah. That's why I started asking around with friends and stuff, and some didn't really agree, others fully agreed, and it's also it's a bit geographically, or like different climbing scenes of different, I think it switches a bit between climbing scenes. Sure. The American climbing scene is it's as far as I see it, it's kind of based on red pointing.
Yeah, definitely.
And in Europe, there's a lot of, people just go climbing, and maybe it has to do with the fact that there's so many cliffs in Europe. If you go to Spain, you can go to a cliff every other day that's completely new.
Yep. For me, that's sort of how it happened. I was a Red River climber.
Yeah. And then
that's where I learned to climb, and I had sort of run out of on-site opportunities. Unless I continued to get better, and red pointing was the path forward as far as I could tell. Yeah. So that's definitely.
I think it's also a bit of an old man cure.
Yeah, totally.
Like you can kind of trick your way or cheat your way through the hard parts.
Let's just call it tactics. Let's not call it cheating. You can strategize.
I kind of feel that it's cheating. Like there's no more of this relentless, like you have to do it. You don't know what's coming, and
right.
You have to be strong. Now you can just what's coming, and you can work the shit out of it.
Yep.
And then
it's
everything
more like
becomes
a video
lot
game,
easier.
less like a boxing match.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is what's so nice about it. And I think for me, I started to think like where that, if you can call it a transformation, when that happened to me. And I think that's actually that happened in Yosemite when I was started working on the nose. I had a long period of like a couple of weeks where I was basically working on a couple of pitches. Mm-hmm. I was there by myself, so I couldn't really do a lot of climbing. except work on those pitches. And eventually I found a belayer, and I had everything so wired that it went down very easily. But that those days of work on a very few feet of climbing, I think that changed something for me. I kind of fell in love with the search for detail and like the perfection of a certain sequence.
Yeah.
Especially on the nose, it's very necessary. And maybe like 99% of the route is actually quite, doable. It's a lot. I think 90% is like 5-10 climbing. And there's a couple of sections that are very hard. And the trick for the nose is just to get those wired as well as possible, so that if you do a push from the ground, that, you know exactly how to do everything.
Right. So you were forced into it by this one style of climbing, basically.
Yeah, I mean that's I think that's when it happened. And even though the nose is a very different thing from high-end sport climbing, but it's basically there's quite a lot of similarities. Also, when you take bouldering, that's basically what the strongest boulders in the world are doing right now.
Right.
They're working their asses off to do these 3, 4, 5. I mean, sometimes it's a bit more, but there's just a few moves they're working for days and days on, just trying to find a way to do them, perfection of moves.
Yeah. I mean, early on in the big wall free climbing scene, when that whole idea was just beginning, that was Todd Skinner's whole approach was, let's go to Waco and spend the winter, because if we have to be able to do the hardest 3 move sequences, so let's train those on the ground, and then we can go up to the
Tommy told me that prior to when I was trying the nose, that bouldering or ElCap free climbing, ElCap is basically bouldering.
Yeah.
Like, people think it's an endurance thing, but it's a lot of logistics, hard work, and hard bouldering.
Yeah.
On a small hold.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool to frame it like that. So let's dig into kind of the training and the sequence of it all for Project 9B. You started with just some general base training. Was that more like your training for the World Cup, where it's more broad? Because this was pre going to Spain to check out fight or flight, right?
This was actually... Yes. So in total, I think my training was 4 months. It got a bit shorter because I started off with an injury. And the very basics of my training weren't anything different than what I did for lead climbing. Even for bouldering. It's just, how to fill in the exercises. That's what changed. And it's, the training is nothing extraordinary. Like it's not even something very scientific.
Well, I think that's important for people to see, though,
it's
and to
something
understand.
very basic. And what I did was try to adapt to a certain goal, like try to react to what's necessary.
Right. So you started with this big pool of basic fitness, essentially.
What was a bit of a problem, what was also interesting about it, is as soon as I started, my level was very, very low, like compared to, it was basically my base level.
Right. And you had a finger injury.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, I'd been setting for the youth world championships for I think 3 weeks or something, and that injury started again, so I had to take some time off. And I think it's actually been quite a couple of years since I had that much time off. So then after like a couple of months of basically no training and just going climbing regularly, you basically arrive at like what I call my base level. It's like if you climb once in a while, then you end up at this bottom plateau where you can only go up from, but you won't really go any lower. Except
and where is your base level, would you say?
It's kind of hard to say in grades, but I don't know. I think if I stop climbing for a couple of months, and then restart, climb in just once or twice in a week, I will be at maybe, I don't know, an onside 13, low 13 something.
Okay.
Something like that. I think as far as I've seen in the previous years, that's always something that, I can still climb. like maybe 8B, like 13 plus or something. That's always something I can climb fairly quickly.
Sure.
Even if level is very, very low.
Yep. Well, I think that's important to see as well, because your big project is 9B.
Yeah.
But your base level
always a
falls
jump
back to roughly a number below there.
That's I think what a lot of people forget is that you cannot move from 0 all the way to 1 to like, or you can move from 0 to 100%, but if your goal is too high, then and your base level is too low, it's just not going to happen in 1 year.
Right.
Like it will take multiple training cycles.
Yep.
And that's what you see if you look at comp climbers these days, that they have a lot of cycles behind them, and they steadily grow stronger each cycle most of the time. So even though sometimes injuries can drop you down a bit, but especially if you're looking at somebody that got injured, they drop down, let's say, a couple of cycles, and then it's very hard to catch up with the rest because they're steadily growing and growing. Right. They're getting stronger and stronger.
Yep.
So it, like, fitness has a lot to do with training cycles over the years, you know. And some people, they take very little rest, so they're always training. And of course, if the level where you start at, if the level where you start your training is very high, then of course your training is going to be, you know, even higher, or your level after your training is going to be even higher.
Right. And that, you know, exactly what you said, people shouldn't be jumping right into the program you're doing if they've never trained before. You've got a high training age. You've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, I think certain exercises would definitely be a bit, you know, a bit too much.
Yeah. And the frequency that you were doing it might be a little much, at least the frequency for at first.
I wouldn't even be too sure about that. I like the frequency that I did was nothing out of the nothing extraordinary.
Okay.
I basically went climbing like 4 to 5 times a week, which I think any beginning climber would be able to do.
Yep, depending on the intensity, for sure.
Depending on the intensity, of course.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think beginning climbers, they have, you know, a higher risk of injury, especially fingers if they're not used to a certain strain. It's for sure better to build up the intensity slowly, and also the amount of days you train. But I think it's like the training that I did, it's only about adaptation. Like, I have a certain goal, so I need to adapt it to that goal. If somebody has a different goal, then you can't do the exact same training, but you have to adapt it to what you think is necessary.
Yep.
That's why I try to emphasize the fact that if somebody uses any of this information that I put on the web, it's important for them to understand that if their goal is, for example, a 4-move boulder problem or a 50-meter endurance route, they will have to adapt the training that I, you know, posted there,
right,
to their goal, because it's so much different. And this might be one of the hardest things in training, to be able to see how to adapt it so that it's efficient. I think a lot of people aren't really able to do so, since it's all about, first of all, self-evaluation, like defining your strengths and weaknesses. And also a lot about, you know, it's experience in both in training, but also in climbing, like to see what is actually necessary, to see which abilities you already have, and which abilities you're lacking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you need to train for.
Yeah, and I mean, that's how we all make our living. That's what supports the podcast, is, you know, training climbers and helping people come up with training plans. So, well,
that's why I think
you're exactly right.
I always got a lot of questions about training, and this is maybe partly one of the reasons why I, you know, made this website, just to get some information out for those people interested. But I also, like, most of these questions I get about training, I always find them quite easy to answer, because people they're not realistic about their training.
Right.
I very often have people come to me and they tell, okay, I want to start training really, you know, schematically, And then I ask, okay, like how much are you training per, like how many sessions do you do a week? And they said like, it's kind of like 1 or 2 sessions a week maybe. I've been climbing for 2 years. And then my only answer can be like, okay, increase the amount of sessions you do a week. Like try to climb more. Mm-hmm. And if I look at the climbers around me, the strong climbers around me that have been training for years and years, there's so little scheme behind it. There's not really that, that's the science that people think.
Right.
In climbing yet. I think in the future this will grow, of course.
Yep, for sure.
But
it doesn't have to be as complicated as some people want it
like
to
a
be.
lot of the comp climbers, they're basically just freewheeling.
Yeah.
And this is very weird to understand. And I think now it's starting to change because a lot of climbers are actually working together with coaches. They're training in teams. So there is some theory behind it, but it's nowhere as much as people think.
Yeah. And I think the majority of climbers, and you tell me if you agree or disagree, but I think the majority of climbers don't need the science that's coming out just
sure,
yet.
Yeah, definitely. Like a lot of the 90% is all about hard work.
Right.
And then of course you can benefit by, I don't know, the science in climbing, if we can call it like that. Mm-hmm. Like the evaluation of movement. Actually, in comp bouldering right now, it's becoming a bit of a topic where some people have started to analyze movement.
Right, Udo and
I'm actually, we had a discussion about it yesterday, and actually I'm happy that it got started. People started to do so, but I'm actually a bit skeptic about it since it's up to now. It's basically, I call it pseudoscience.
Yep.
It's not really it's not really scientifically based. So I think it's nice that it's people are doing it, but the stuff that I've seen, I'm not really too confident about.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where that stuff goes as well.
But the more and more people do it, then the productive discussion will start, and eventually, we'll end up at an efficient level.
Yeah. Yeah, but so the way that your system worked, just to jump back into it, was that big first phase of base training. Then you went over to Spain to check out routes. You hadn't settled on fight or flight just yet.
I had quite done so.
Okay. You were pretty sure that was the one.
Throughout the summer of 2017, I had tried a lot of the routes that I thought would be nice to focus on.
Gotcha.
And especially fight or flight was very high on my list. Mm-hmm. And logistically, it was also one of the nicer ones.
Okay.
Even though it's not in driving distance for me.
Yeah. So what were the key elements that made you choose that one? Since it's not something you can just go try at the end of a day when you happen to feel
well,
good.
there is not a route that I can go try at the end of the day so far. I actually started to, bold like a crazy person around Innsbruck.
Right.
Looking for projects, and there are a lot of projects, but it's kind of hard to find a route that is nice to climb on. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure there is 9Bs in the vicinity. I think we're going to need an Adam for that. But I had some specifics in mind that for me were important about a route. First of all, it needed to be as like completely natural or like a very high level of or a very low level of manufacturing.
Right.
And this is a separate discussion, and I found out that people are very ill-informed about it.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's a very delicate topic.
Absolutely.
Because especially since people are not very well informed, I think they misunderstand very quickly.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think all I want to say to that is, imagine something very hard, like cutting end sport route. I think everybody can imagine the holes are very tiny,
Right.
and on limestone, those tiny holes are very brittle.
Yep.
And there's actually a lot of problems with routes changing all the time. And sometimes if these route changes, they become impossible. And I mean, that can be very annoying if you've been trying a route for 5 years and all of a sudden your keyhole breaks. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
And I think some people have chosen the way of securing these holds, basically using Sika to reinforce them. And I think there needs to be an open and productive discussion rather than in the climbing community, rather than just opinions that are not really well based.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a pretty delicate topic.
But still, for me, this was one of the. I saw some pretty ugly stuff. I saw some really well bolted routes, like that were basically put up in a very nice style. So this was one of the specifics that a route needed to have. And fight or flight is almost completely natural. There's some Sika to reinforce holds, but it doesn't really get in the way, I think.
Right.
And then second of all, it's about the style of climbing. A friend of mine, Jacob Schubert, he had climbed this route, and he is not the most patient type of climber. He is. Right. I think he's primarily a calm climber, and if he goes on rock, then he's not looking into anything that is, in his words, disgusting or horrible to climb on.
Right.
I think Adam, for example, is a very much more patient climber.
Yeah.
He will just appreciate every type of climbing.
Right.
That there
He'll find
is.
a reason to appreciate it.
And Jakob is always looking for something specific. And I had to agree with him on this certain route that it has a lot of advantages. It climbs quickly. So you don't end up climbing on a route for 1.5 hours to fall at the very last move.
Right.
And then basically your day is over.
Which is especially bad when it's a big road trip and you're
yes, exactly.
Far from
that
home.
would just it would just make me so tired.
Yeah.
This is a route you can climb in like a couple of maybe 1 or 2 minutes even. You fall off and you can do a couple of tries a day.
Right.
Which is very nice. There's also no long entry in it. You don't have to sit at a no-hand for like half an hour. Some of these routes, they have maybe like a 5:14 entry, then a no-hand ledge where you can sit on, and then the route starts.
Right.
These things are they're details that I think to most climbers, they don't really realize how annoying they can be.
Yeah. And you're not saying you wouldn't climb those routes.
No, but I was
just not your highest end.
But I was looking for
project.
something that I wanted to spend so much time on.
Right.
I knew that this was going to take me one season or even several seasons, several
it's a big
years.
investment.
It's a very big investment. I would spend a lot of time on it, and I didn't want to lose not only motivation but also the fun on climbing on this route.
Yeah.
That's why
so important.
It needed to fit. It's also nice if it fits your style, of course, but it needs to draw your how do you say? Every person has a certain style of climbing he prefers, and this route is just it's 100% what I like.
Yeah.
The amount of the amount of moves, the time you climb on it, the type of holds, the type of moves, it's just, to me, it's my dream route.
Yeah. So you said about learning everything you could about it, moves, conditions.
Yeah. So I knew all the details. I had started that base layer of training just to get me back to fit. Then I went to Spain just to check it out because I had only tried it previously, I think 2 years in advance, and I had only tried it like 3 times.
Gotcha.
That's where I fell in love with this route. I knew how great it was, and
the seed was planted there.
Exactly. I knew how much I liked it, how well it fit me, and this trip was basically to check out all the details, to find beta, which is of course very important, because beta refinement is basically all that counts in projecting. Like you're always trying to change the little subtle details that make a move from too hard to okay hard.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time on the route. Basically, during 2 weeks, I was trying to go there as much as possible and just hop on this route.
Were you working on it with someone at the time? Were you sharing beta with someone?
I was actually working. Back then there was 2 guys trying it, a French guy and a Spanish guy. And when I came back in March, there was actually more people trying it, which I thought would have been annoying, and it turned out actually really nice.
What was nice about it, out of curiosity?
At first, it's very obvious to think that it would be annoying, since there's actually a very short time window throughout the day where you can try it. It's in the sun until 2, 3, and then it gets dark quite early. So if you have 3 to 3 hours to try on it, then it's a bit of logistic to find a good window with 4 people trying at the same time.
Right.
And then it turned out really nice that everybody that was trying the route, it wasn't a really competitive scene, since everybody, it's not like you're climbing against each other in competition.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, competitiveness is not something I don't like and I don't agree with, since it can be very productive.
Absolutely.
But on rock, I was surprised that it's not competitive at all, and you can actually help each other. First of all, motivate each other, and second of all, just like I said, beta refinement. Everybody finds these small little details. There was Piotr Schaab, a Polish guy who was trying it. He found this tiny little knee bar that changed the entire crux for me. It made it so much nicer to climb. And this, without him, I wouldn't even have thought about it.
Right.
So, and Mehdi Hong was trying it. He ended up doing it eventually, and this just, it made me, it renewed my motivation completely.
Yeah.
I saw the happiness that this route, or the success on this route, cost for him. I saw how emotional he was about the entire thing, and it just made me realize that this project is really important for me.
Yeah, and I think those reasons are why it's so important not to, if you walk up to the crag and there are people on your project, not to just annoyed. Say, "Oh, I'll wait for another day."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's a very productive process to be able to work on something not only by yourself, but with other people.
Yeah.
Because, like I said before, self-evaluation is kind of hard. I don't know a lot of people that can do this very well, and other people it's very easy to see flaws or small mistakes that other people make, and you can correct them a lot easier than those people can correct themselves.
Yeah.
So it was actually a very nice process.
Good.
But anyway, that November or December, I think it already was, after that base training, I went over there for 2 weeks to try it, and I actually felt very good in it already. I think I can do it with like 2 or 3 hangs. And so all the moves I had dialed, some holds had crumbled and it got harder, and that's the annoying process about it. So I got home beginning of 2018, and I was, like I said before, I was 100% psyched to start training for this.
Yeah.
And after this, like it's on the website, but the main training is like this base layer. Then there's a phase that's basically around max power. So a lot of bouldering, a lot of power exercises, just to get that strength necessary. And then the third phase is basically it's endurance based, but
and endurance based, really specific to
down
that
to
route.
that project. So I not the 60 move endurance that people think is endurance, but more this power endurance.
Right.
So I did a lot of short circuits, a lot of specific project tries. That was actually key for me. I had found a project or I had set a project in the gym that was actually quite similar. I didn't even try to make it that similar, and it felt like I was climbing on the route. It was a bit harder, which is always good.
Yeah,
because then you come back to Spain and it's like, oh, this actually feels easier.
Right.
So this was all very motivating. Training worked out really well because of that motivation. It's kind of dangerous to max it, to feel when it's enough.
Right.
If the motivation is not the problem, if there's motivation to spare, then it's always very easy to do too much.
Yeah, and you said in your blog that one of the things you recognized was that you were needing a little more rest than you had in the past, and you sort of got around that by varying the intensity of the sessions.
Yeah, especially because I'm not the youngest anymore. I think at 20 to 25, you can handle a lot more training.
Right.
But you also, I would almost say, you need a lot more training.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think to reach the same level, I need less training, but it needs to be more effective. So because this route is so short, as I said before, 25 moves to a rest to 15 moves, it's very important to have a high max power and a good power endurance.
Yep.
So you don't need to be able to rest down after 50 moves, like the complete full-on pump, to be able to rest down to a reasonable level. Because as soon as you get pumped on this route, you fall off right away. You won't be able to do another move.
Right.
And this is why I think, especially for this route, it was more important to do a training which was quality-based and quantity-based. So each session I try to make it as intensive as possible. And the key about training itself is, in my opinion at least, is to you do your training day, and then comes actually the most important thing, the rest phase. And the rest phase needs to be as long, so that the next training you're not completely tired. You cannot start your training fully tired, because the training will be shit.
Right.
So it's really hard to find that balance between training as much as possible, as much as necessary, and still have that freshness in your training.
Yeah. I'm glad you said as much as necessary.
Yeah. Not as much as possible. I think that's definitely not well phrased. And if you're aiming for something like full on endurance, 1.5 hour roof route, then it's a total different story. Then you're gonna need a lot of quantity and a lot of like endurance based climbing. But this was something I needed to feel fresh all the time.
Yep.
Because if the moves are that hard, then if you're tired, your level drops. So if I would have a training day where I would feel tired, I would just either make it very short, or just go home, rest, and then wait for the next window where you feel fresh. Mm-hmm. And I see also for competition climbing, lead climbing, I see a lot of people that make the mistake of they just want to train as much as possible, and they're tired all the time. Yep. And that, then eventually the productivity just decreases.
Yeah, you're just going downhill.
Yeah.
Digging yourself a hole.
It's a struggle to constantly motivate yourself, even if you feel tired. And then if it just makes you weaker, then your motivation drops completely. So it's a bit of
it's a tough line to walk.
Exactly.
For sure.
You need to find that balance to not be happy after 1 hour of training and like, I think I did enough.
Right.
You really need to push yourself into that maximum level. That's also what a lot of people don't do during their training.
Yeah.
Like they really push themselves to 100%.
Yep. It's easy to get to about 75%.
Exactly.
Feel like you pushed it.
And some of these, some climbers, and most of the times they turned into very strong climbers. They can really push themselves also during training.
Right.
And some climbers are not even in a competition or during their project. They're not even able to reach that, that 100% of using their strength.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a practiced thing for some people.
Yeah.
And if you can practice it in the gym and
There
take it out
there
to your
is a lot of
project.
exercises, like easy exercises to train. This is also something you can train. You know,
Absolutely.
training is not only about the physical side. It's a lot about the mental aspects and the tactical approach, and you know all that stuff that people kind of like, you know, sweep to the side and like, I don't need that.
Yeah, that's the stuff we actually try to focus on quite a bit
Well, that's good to
in
hear.
our coaching and training.
It can be the hardest part. Like some
Yeah.
people, I think instinctively are very good at it.
Yep.
And other people, they need somebody to correct them or need to correct themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your max power phase, what would you say is the boulder grade of the hardest move or hardest short sequence on fight or flight?
Well, we talked about this actually with the others that were trying this, and this is something I always find funny, that route climbers, they try to break it down into bouldering grades because it never actually works.
Right.
We tried to come up first with the 25 moves. We thought it was 9A to arrest, and then to a 15 move 8C route.
Okay.
So it's like 14 plus to arrest to 14B. Whether that's true, that's just a blind guess we came up with.
Right. Which is what all grades are, really.
Yes, exactly. And then the hardest move is definitely at the end of the first part, just before the rest. And that could be like V11 boulder.
Okay.
And it doesn't sound very hard. So maybe it is actually a little higher, especially since it took us quite a couple of days to do those moves. They're really, really powerful. So they might end up a little higher, but on the other hand, you do this like 514 climbing into it,
Right.
and that makes it hard.
Sure.
That's why I think a lot of route climbers, they easily get the idea that, you know, that boulder move up there is so hard. It got to be V14. If not, I wouldn't be falling there.
Right.
But then they realize that, or they don't realize that, like 510 climbing into a V13 boulder problem is just so ridiculously hard already.
Right.
So it's I want to say it's just really hard to pin it down to a boulder grade.
Sure.
But I think as a single move, I would have still said like V11.
Okay.
It's nothing out of the ordinary.
And then when you're in the gym training, are you shooting for specific grades, or are you just looking to
definitely not.
always challenge yourself at your maximum?
I don't think grades at all. And even though this project is basically, I mean, the name says it all, it's about a grade. It's easy to see it that it's very grade as something very grade based, but it's actually not. It started out as something. I picked 9B because, first of all, I thought it was my maximum that I could climb. I wanted something that challenged me in a certain way, that I would need to work on it for months and months, or even several years.
Yep.
But it still needed to be possible. You need to be realistic. Like, I can work on something for 15 years, and if it doesn't go, then of course the process is nice. It was nice, but you know, it's nicer if you succeed.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, 9B, you know, at least when I started this thing, it was kind of like cutting edge.
Sure.
Adam and Chris had climbed 9B plus. There was like 10 people that climbed 9B or something, and I think especially this year it kind of exploded, because I think the main reason for that is people actually dared to start climbing on these routes.
Right.
I don't think the level got that higher, but if you take Jonathan Siegrist, for example, he was that strong a couple of years ago, but he was climbing.
He was just
15A.
building up this giant base beneath him. Yeah.
And now he hopped on 9B and like he climbed it, as far as I know, pretty quickly now.
Right.
Like there's room for like to the top is not really reached, you know, for a lot of people.
Yep.
So I think I was just trying to say that the grade is not that important.
Yeah.
And especially in training, it's not important at all. It doesn't matter at all.
Absolutely. I agree.
on whether you train on routes, of course you can give it a grade. It's nice to to see.
It's how we measure.
Exactly.
And
but in bouldering it doesn't make sense at all. We don't climb on the training we do is not on preset boulder problems.
Right.
But we have a bouldering room. We do have this, but I don't use it.
Yep.
Especially not for the training I did for Project 9B. But we have a bouldering room which is completely filled up with holes, and we make up boulder problems, specific boulder problems, or regular boulder problems, or 1 movers to 20 movers.
Right.
Everything from very short boulder problems to short circuits to long circuits, and then a large or wide range of power exercises on a campus board, on the bouldering room, on the pull-up bar, whatever you can think of. You can do so much.
Yep.
And variation was always what was important to me. This keeps the motivation also in training high. It just makes it so much more fun,
Mm-hmm.
You can get so creative with exercises. And if you're not creative, then just look at other people, what they do, and repeat it and try to do that. And you'll see that it's actually so much more fun to do something new than always doing the same old exercise you're already good in.
Yeah. Are there exercises you're repeating?
Of course, yeah.
To be
The
able to
exercises
judge?
I actually suck on.
Okay.
A good climbing coach once told me that he thought that the training that you do is good up to a certain point where you don't see a change, where
You stop
where
making
you
progress in the
stagnate
training, right?
the progress. And then you switch your training, you do different exercises, and you gain progress in these exercises, and as soon as you stagnate, you move on to a different training. That's, it's a theoretical approach, but I think it actually works quite well.
Yeah.
And I just had some major weaknesses. I always also had some strengths. And I'm not a fan of training only one or the other. But there was definitely some weaknesses that I had to work on very hard. So I did. And I'm really bad at campusing. I just can't do one armors. So it's stuff like that. I kind of try to work on like upper body power. I have very strong fingers, but upper body power is something I kind of lacked, and especially due to the bouldery aspect of this route, that I kind of felt this was necessary.
Yeah.
And it helped me a lot.
And I think it's exciting and motivating to find that thing that you can really improve at.
Yeah.
Because then you get to see improvement. If
Yes,
you're
but it's
only
not
working
always.
on
Sometimes you're working on weaknesses and you just don't get better, and it can be frustrating. But that's it. That's life.
Yeah, and if you can see the overall more global picture,
Yeah.
And I like the idea that you're not only focused on your weaknesses, that you also go in, play to your strengths sometimes. And
I mean, I kind of picked a route that I knew that fit my style. So then you can always improve, and also you can improve your strengths.
Sure.
So it doesn't make sense to only train your weaknesses.
Yeah, we like to say you can't have weaknesses without strengths.
Yeah, that's kind of true.
Yeah, so you have to keep cultivating those strengths as well. So.
And also my strengths, like relative to other people, they're weaknesses. If I say I have strong fingers, and I look at Daniel Woods, for example, my fingers are weak as shit.
Yeah,
like Daniel will laugh at me if I see if he hears me telling I have strong fingers, then like I'm not able to hang on to the holes that he can choke up on.
Yeah, and that'll always be the case.
Exactly, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, as what I've learned through the last 15 years or something is that it's easy to look at other people and compare yourself to it, but it doesn't help you in the end.
Right.
It's handy that you can see flaws that you have and or strengths that other people have, so you can work on that. But in the end, it's you that needs to be needs to do the climbing, not the other person. So whether it's in comps or on rock climbing, you can compare yourself with other people, but it's not going to make you any stronger.
Yeah. I find some benefit in comparison as long as you're not taking it personal.
Exactly. Yeah. And competitiveness is something sometimes productive, but I think to a lot of people it's counterproductive. And as soon as you reach that stage, then you kind of need to work on that.
Yep, totally. So you go through your power phase into power endurance, and then your you're ready to go back to Spain.
Yeah, I was really ready. At the end of my training, I was actually impatient. Like last 2 weeks, I was reserved to cut down the quantity and even more focus on quality of training, just to get your body rested for trying the route. For comps, we do the same thing. Like it's not useful to train your ass out just a week before the comp.
Right,
you'll just be tired. So I was actually I was really impatient to get over there.
Yeah.
And back then I had a lot I had a lot of stuff on university to do. So it was fine. I wasn't sitting at home, being really impatient. But as soon as I was on that plane to Spain, I was really ready for it. It hardly felt as I was more in another phase of my life, I was more ready.
Yeah.
So which was nice. I felt super fit as I could have been with that amount of training. Motivation was high, and especially the confidence was high. And many people are always scared to be confident because if you don't succeed, then people will think like, he said he was going to do it, but he didn't.
Right.
But to me, confidence is something that you need to have for success.
So important.
Like you can sometimes even trick yourself a little bit. Just try to be. I think overconfidence is better than the opposite.
Right.
So I felt confident, and expectations were high, but not in a counterproductive way. Like I knew that this could be this might well be a multi-year project, and in the end it turned out, which wasn't a problem. It wasn't when it didn't happen, when I didn't climb the route at the end of those 3 weeks. I actually planned to go back, got injured with a knee injury, and of course it's a bummer, but I am okay with it because I know that I have time, I have the motivation. That route is not going to walk away. Right. And even if all the holds break, I'm just going to find a new route.
Right.
So that's a nice thing about it. I wasn't training for one specific event. Let's take World Championships or whatever, Olympics. That's another goal to train for. It's a lot more heavy on the mind, since there's only one time where you need to be fit, and if you screw up, then it's over.
Right.
I mean, maybe then in 2 years there's another comp. In 4 years there's another Olympics. You never know, but the rock route is gonna stay. So,
and really, ultimately, you're not even training for the specific. Globally, ultimately, you're not even training for that specific route. You're really training to get yourself to a certain place. And
I think in general, I always use the fact that training. I was preparing for a certain project or a certain goal, a challenge, and I used training for several goals. That made it very nice that if one goal I didn't achieve one goal, then there was always the other. Always also in during my competition years, even though I trained primarily for competitions, I was using that strength that I developed during training for doing these rock trips or even climbing ElCap or something. I had developed the skills in my training for comp climbing, primarily for comp climbing.
Right.
So that makes the training for me really nice. And also that training I did for Project 9B, it was a very nice base layer for, to work with this summer for the Elite World Cups and the World Championships in September. And of course, if I restart or reactivate Project 9B like fall or maybe this winter, I will still have that base from last year.
Yep.
Which I didn't have last year. I mean, I was basically, I only had a bouldering base, and my endurance was quite shitty at the start. So it's kind of nice to have several goals when you look at training.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I think you really exemplified that when you came back from Spain, having gotten close, and then got injured just before your next trip, and it doesn't sound like the first indication of
it was a bit of a bummer.
I'm sure it was. And I'd love to talk about that a little bit. But the only indication I've even heard that you might not continue with the project was when you just said, if I restart the project. And I assume that's still a goal that you're going to...
Yeah, it wasn't really an if. It was when I...
Right. Right.
I think the only reason for me not to restart the project is either something personal happens or something.
Sure.
Or I get injured, so I'm not able to continue my training and preparation. That's the only reason for me to stop this project.
Yeah.
Because I like it too much,
Absolutely. So when you got injured, I know we're running short on time here. I know you've got a million things you probably got to do. Got to go hang out at the pool with Kata. But talk to me about the injury just a little bit. You had gotten really close on this big project, and then you partially tore ACL and MCL, correct?
Yeah,
in the gym?
yeah. A lot of stuff was, it wasn't really a giant injury or something.
Right.
A lot of stuff was partially torn, like the meniscus had a little dent, and it was nothing out of the ordinary. I was just training. I was still a bit. I was not very healthy. I was a bit sick, and I think that in fact caused the stuff to weaken. And I had already decided to climb on easier routes just because I didn't feel well.
Right.
And I did this drop knee, which felt a bit awkward, but wasn't any much like the big drop knees you can see Adam sometimes doing or something.
Right.
It wasn't something very strange that I shouldn't have been doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I right away felt that something popped, and I for like an hour or something I tried to tell myself maybe it's not that bad, and I kind of knew straight away within a couple of days that I canceled my flight right away, even before I had the diagnose. Just because I knew it was a week in advance, so I knew it wasn't going to happen.
Right.
And then it's basically, working on how should I say the mental aspect of being okay with it, not being too bummed out, and keep that motivation and just take it on to when you can reactivate the project.
Yeah.
And this I think I've done quite well. Partly because I've had so many injuries in the past. I've had a lot of finger injuries. I broke one of my spines once, or one of my, I had a back injury.
A vertebrae,
yeah. And I knew the process, and this, at the end of this injury, I might actually say that's been one of the nicest injuries I've ever had. It was easy the entire process was quite okay.
Mm-hmm.
I could do a lot of training. I wasn't really disabled. I could hike from the start. It was just I couldn't squat. I couldn't do for a long time. The 90-degree angle was max I can do.
Right. So heel hooks were out.
Yeah. So for a couple of weeks I couldn't climb, which wasn't that big a problem. Then I could restart, but I could always do stuff.
Yeah.
And you can do a lot of training with one foot.
Totally.
Which I found out was quite useful, even with no feet.
Especially if you're, like you said, you're bad at campusing. So
exactly, yeah. So I did a lot of that,
in there.
and then of course it's dangerous to have injuries because of that injury. So I almost hurt my shoulder just from too much campusing and no footing. When you're doing 3-hour sessions and not using your feet, it's a total different strain on your body than usual. So your body's going to be like, no, dude, this is not cool.
Yeah, as long as you're listening to it, that's the important part.
So it's part of the process, and it was quite kind of interesting. And I was quite happy to hear that people were asking when are you going to restart, and how's the knee, and are you going to continue on it? And I was always like, of course I'm going to continue.
Yeah.
I just not right now. I mean, it's 30 plus degrees or it's 100 Fahrenheit in Spain right now, so I can't forget about this route until I don't know, late fall. And I always said that Project 9B will be November to April or something, and then afterwards I have to focus on competitions. I don't want one specific goal to how do you say to
permeate everything.
Exactly. To just that I have too much focus on one goal, so I just get sloppy on the others.
Yeah.
There's World Championships coming up. in my hometown. So I want to be fit for that. So I just put it on ice for now. And I'm constantly making plans actually when to reactivate.
And like you already said, you'll be coming back in with a much higher base level than where you started.
And for sure this summer I will keep up hard sport climbing.
Yep.
But there's not really any 9Bs in the vicinity that I think I can try, especially since the only one that's close to my house has the biggest drop knee with the right knee you can ever imagine.
Of course.
So I don't think that's a very smart route to try.
Yeah.
But we're making plans. Also, I got to incorporate Yosemite since, that's not out of the game.
Yeah.
So it's always been...
There's still walls to do.
Yeah. That's always been the struggle. Like I have too much motivation, too many goals at the same time. So I got to plan, efficiently.
Yeah.
But this is definitely, I would still say it's my primary goal. It's on position number 1. But that doesn't mean that I'm not I can put it on ice for a bit.
Yeah. Well, I hugely appreciate you putting it out into the world and, letting us kind of see behind the scenes of it. I had recently started sport climbing again after I got to 14A, which was my big goal. Then I had a shoulder surgery and spent a few years bouldering, and recently started trying to sport climb again, and had my own goals that I was documenting, and got my first injury in the midst of training for it. So the timing of your project was perfect. I was able to kind of watch what you were doing, see how that was going, and get my own motivation from that. And hopefully other people are being motivated by it, and I put my story out there as well. So
it's kind of nice to see that people actually appreciate it.
Yeah, totally.
And people are asking me to document the process of rehabilitation from an injury as well. And I didn't really do it.
Yep. It's tough to do. Especially when you're already good at it and you just go through the motions.
Yes, and also because I had kind of put it on ice the entire project.
Right.
So it didn't really fit in, I think. And as soon as I reactivate, then I'll start blogging about how to reactivate and how to catch up again.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll be happy with whatever we get. I'm glad the project is out there. So.
Oh yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah, so thanks for taking time out to
All right, thanks for having
sit down with me. It's been super fun. Thanks, Jorg. I appreciate you coming over, hanging out, even though you had the World Cup to compete in the next day. I appreciate that a ton. It means a lot. It says a lot about your character, frankly. And for all of you out there, I think we have a lot to learn from this little glimpse into how a professional climber approaches a big goal. Obviously, not every professional climber is going to approach it this way. Some are considerably more haphazard, and that works for them so far. I appreciate Jorg's approach simply because it's very direct. He understands the goal. He's not leaving a lot to chance. I think that's a really powerful thing. I think it removes a lot of excuses when you leave as little to chance as possible. And one of the main, or two of the main components that I think Jorg's training has to teach us is that, number one, it's simple, and number two, it's specific. I think there's a lot to learn from that. And I'm going to dig into that a little more in future episodes. We'll talk about it for sure. Maybe Nate and I'll sit down, do a board meeting, talking about Project 9B. Could be really interesting. And I'm stoked for whenever Project 9B comes back on board. If you haven't seen it, you should go check it out at project-9b.com. And you can kind of see Jorg's build up, the training, the approach, the tactics, and the injury, And soon, like you mentioned, we'll be able to see where he goes from there. And Jorg, I assure you, we are all rooting for you out here. So once again, thanks for sitting down with me. I'll have links to Project 9B, the website, and a bunch of videos that Louder Than 11 and John Glassberg have done with Jorg and his wife Kata. Really great videos and really fun climbers to watch. So you'll find that link in your show notes to all of that. And you guys, I will see you again very soon. Or I won't see you, but you'll hear me again very soon. And by that time, I'll be married. That sounds crazy to say, but I will. Until then, you can find us at powercompanyclimbing.com. We have training plans for all levels of climber there, and all levels of communication. If you don't want a coach breathing down your neck, we won't. You just let us know. You can also find us on the Instagrams. You can find us on the Facebooks. You can find us on the Pinterests. All of those at Power Company Climbing. You can look for us on the Twitter. You can probably find Jorg on the Twitter, and maybe I'll put that in the show notes, but you guys know. You're not going to find us on the Twitter because we don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
This time, this time.